Now, I will admit, we got the Sony WH-1000XM5s much sooner than I expected. I didn't expect these headphones for another 8 to 12 months. Now, even though the 1000XM5s do block out more noise, they sound a little better, and they have better feeling leatherette, the all-new redesigned body on the 1000XM5s has brought us all the way back to square one. Nonetheless, today we're going to check out the 1000XM5s and we're going to see how they compare to the 1000XM4s, 1000XM3s, and I'm even going to lightly sprinkle in the 1000XM2s. Now, regarding pricing, the 1000XM5s retail for $400, which is a $50 price increase from both the 1000XM4s and 1000XM3s when they first came out. However, Sony's original 1000X headphones used to retail for $400 back in the day. Nonetheless, I do expect all of these headphones to go on sale on a regular basis, and personally, I am team 1000XM4. But if you want to pick any of these headphones up, they'll be linked down below. And if you want to further support the channel, check out the merch shelf down below. I've made some shirts and hoodies that look and feel great. And if you've been watching me for a while, you know I can be very particular. So I'll only set my name on something that I'm really proud of. Now first, we have to talk about the 1000XM5's all-new design. This is a complete overhaul from both the 1000XM4's and 1000XM3's bodies, which were an evolution from the 1000XM2's body. Now, instead of continuing to refine the 1000XM4's body, the 1000XM5s basically decided to copy the Bose NC700's and AirPod Max body. And unfortunately, there are some major drawbacks here when compared to Sony's previous design language. For starters, the most glaring drawback of this new body is that it isn't fully collapsible, which means the 1000XM5s have a significantly larger case than all of its predecessors. So if you plan on constantly traveling with these headphones, this case is going to be a big hassle compared to its predecessors and competition. The XM5's case doesn't just simply have a larger footprint than their predecessors, it's also significantly thicker. And even though Sony's new case is similar to Bose's NC700's case, it still has a significantly larger footprint and it's noticeably thicker. So overall, personally for me, the 1000XM5s are not my first choice for traveling because this new case is borderline unmanageable, and it was the first gripe that I had with the 1000XM5s, given that I'm so used to traveling with either my 1000XM4s, XM3s, and now even Bose QC45s. But now let's move on from the case and let's focus on the headphones themselves. The XM5s are using different materials from its predecessors and even the rest of Sony's headphone lineup. For starters, the ear cups on the XM5s are using the same recyclable plastic that's found on the link buds. So these ear cups have a slate finish to them instead of a soft touch finish to them, like what's found on the XM4s and XM3s. Now personally, I am indifferent about Sony's use of a recyclable plastic here because it doesn't make it hard to handle these headphones, unlike the link buds. Since their case is slippery, they're harder to handle. But more importantly, the 1000XM5s are using all new leatherette, and this is great news because the leatherette on the 1000X series has always been very lackluster, especially compared to the rest of the competition. Now, the leatherette on the XM5s is very smooth and it's very soft, but there's no grain to it like what you would find on the leatherette found on either the Bose NC700 or QC45. But the important thing here is that it doesn't feel plasticky like the leatherette found on previous models. This leatherette feels a little bit like silicone, but with less friction. Overall, I like it. But now let's talk about fit. Now, one of the cool things about the XM5s is that Sony managed to shave off 4 grams. So, the XM5s weigh in at 250 grams, whereas both the XM4s and XM3s weigh in at 254 grams. The XM2s weigh in at 275 grams, and for comparison's sake, the Bose NC700 weigh in at 274 grams, and the AirPod Max weigh in at a hefty 384 grams. So personally, I am very happy to see that Sony is at least still focusing on putting out lightweight headphones, because weight does contribute to overall comfort. However, the XM5s are a very long way off from your more ultra lightweight headphones, like either the Bose QC45, which weigh in at 234 grams, and then there's the PXC552s, which weigh in at 230 grams. But unfortunately, there are some noticeable comfort issues on the 1000XM5's new body, which just aren't present on the XM4s and XM3s. Now yes, the Sony 1000XM5s are big head approved, but they do have a little more clamping force than both the XM4s and XM3s. But this isn't the biggest issue here. The new headband on the XM5s is significantly thinner and has significantly less padding than the XM4s and XM3s headband. So personally for me, I have noticed that the headband on the XM5s does like to create a hot spot on the top of my head after wearing these headphones for 45 minutes. Whereas hotspots has never been an issue for me with any of these previous 1000X headphones. But then there are the ear pads on the XM5s. Now, Sony has been progressively increasing the diameter of their ear pads with every new release. And now, the XM5s have the largest diameter on them, which is great. However, something that Sony has just neglected, and actually, they just reduced this on the XM5s from the XM4s, is the depth of their ear pads. Even though the earpads on the XM5s have a larger diameter, they're way shallower than the XM4s, and they're even a little more shallow than the XM3s. So what I've noticed with the XM5s is that they really like to push down on the cartilage of my average size ears. And after a while, this does get uncomfortable. So the combination of the hotspot from the headband and the constant pressing down of my ears, I simply can't wear the XM5s for nearly as long as either my XM4s or XM3s. So personally, I would only recommend the XM5s if you have low profile ears, and if you have very large ears or ears that stick out a lot, then I still recommend that you go with either the Bose NC700, Bose QC45, or Sennheiser PXC552. Because their earpads have a lot more depth to them than the 1000XM5s. So overall, I am going to have to say that the 1000XM4s are way more comfortable than the 1000XM5s. The additional 4 grams on the XM4s is negligible. But more importantly, the XM4s have less clamping force, their headband doesn't create a hot spot on the top of your head, and their earpads are more spacious because they don't press down on your ears. So with the XM4s, I can wear them for hours on end. Whereas with the 1000XM5s, at the 45-minute mark, I'm already needing a break. And even though the ear cups on the XM3s aren't as spacious, they're still more comfortable than the XM5s as well. But now let's talk about tech specs. Unfortunately, there aren't any major or exciting changes to point out here. The XM5s still have an advertised battery life of 30 hours with their active noise cancellation turned on, the same as both the XM4s and XM3s. However, with the XM5s, they can go for as long as 40 hours with their active noise cancellation turned off, 2 hours more than both the XM4 and XM3, so at least there's that. Now, don't get me wrong, having an advertised battery life of 30 hours with their ANC turned on is good, but I was really hoping Sony would kick it up a notch to, let's say, 35 or maybe even 40 hours with their ANC turned on. But regardless, the XM5s still have a really good battery life on them. And in order to charge these headphones up, the XM5s charge via a USB-C port just like the XM4s and XM3s. And I just want to quickly say this. If you're still somehow using the XM2s, then I feel that this is a good enough reason to upgrade. And I also want to quickly point out that the XM5s have slightly better fast charging. Because if you were to charge these headphones up for 3 minutes from a dead battery, they're going to get you 3 hours of playback time. Whereas with both the XM4s and XM3s, if you were to charge them up for 10 minutes from a dead battery, they're gonna get you 5 hours of playback time. Now, when it comes to connectivity, just like with the XM4s, the XM5s can be connected to 2 devices at the same time. But just like with the XM4s, if you want to use this feature on the XM5s, then you're going to be stuck with AAC. Now, if you're an iPhone user, this doesn't really matter because iPhones top out at AAC. But if you're an Android user that wants to take advantage of LDAC, then you're going to have to make some sacrifices, because when these headphones are using LDAC, they can only be connected to one device at a time. But at least both the XM5s and XM4s can be connected to two devices at the same time, because this is something that both the XM3s and XM2s just can't do. And in general, Sony has been very slow to add this feature to their headphones. But when it comes to overall performance, these headphones have zero latency across the board when watching movies or videos on your phone, whether you're using an iPhone or an Android device. And when it comes to audio codecs, both the XM4s and XM5s have support for SBC, AAC, and Sony's own LDAC. Unfortunately, the XM4s and XM5s don't have any aptX support like the XM3s, because Sony has moved away from using aptX on their headphones and instead just using their own in-house audio codec like LDAC. But in general, this really only matters if you're an iPhone user, because like I mentioned earlier, iPhones top out at AAC, which is still perfectly fine. However, I am very happy to point out that thankfully Sony has not removed the audio jack on the XM5s. And personally, I was very worried that Sony would do this because everybody just loves to copy what Apple does. And personally, I still feel that this was a very foolish mistake. But unfortunately, I do have to point out that you still can't use the USB-C port on the XM5s as a wired connection like you can with some other headphones out there. And personally, I feel that it's time that more headphones added this feature. And also, you can't use these headphones while they're plugged in and charging, but they can be used passively. But now let's talk about sound quality. Now, whenever I talk about the sound quality of a pair of headphones, I'm talking about them while their active noise cancellation is turned off. Because with some headphones, their ANC can really affect their overall sound quality. They can sound more narrow and or their bass won't resonate as deep. But thankfully, that has never been an issue for any of Sony's headphones. Sony's ANC doesn't really affect the overall sound quality on their headphones, which is great. But with all that being said, this is with the ANC being turned off on all of these headphones. Now yes, the XM5s do sound a little better than both the XM4s and XM3s. Specifically, the XM5s have a little better instrument separation than their predecessors, so they sound a little more open. And I feel that this is a very big deal and a really good step in the right direction, because Sony's headphones have always sounded a little narrow when compared to their direct competitors. Now, even though the XM5s sound more open than the XM4s and XM3s, it's not a huge and noticeable difference. And even though the XM5s do have better instrument separation, they do have a little less physicality in their bass than both the XM3s and XM4s. So if you're someone that likes to physically feel the kick from your bass on your headphones, the XM5s is going to deliver less than both the XM4s and XM3s. And I think the smaller 30mm drivers on these headphones is part of the reason why, versus the 40mm drivers that you'll find on both the XM4s and XM3s. And even though the XM5s do have an adjustable EQ, and you can go in and raise the clear bass slider on these headphones, and as a result, they will have more kick in their bass, both the XM3s and XM4s will continue to have more bass if you raise their sliders as well. So overall, when it comes to sound quality, technically, yes, the XM5s sound better than the XM4s and XM3s because they have the better instrument separation, but it's a very subtle improvement, and the instrument separation on the XM5s is still nowhere near the level of the Sennheiser Momentum 3s or AirPod Max. So personally, I would only recommend the XM5s if you're someone that doesn't need that kick in their bass. But if you do need that kick in your bass, then you're better off with the XM4s or XM3s. And if you're really serious about sound, then you're better off with either the Momentum 3s, Bowers & Wilkins PX7s, and dare I even say this, AirPod Max. But now let's talk about the media controls on these headphones. Just like past 1000X headphones, the XM5s have a touchpad. And as far as touchpads go, this one is very easy to use and it's very accurate. But there are two pro tips that I do want to share with you. First off, if you swipe up and hold, then you can continuously raise or lower your volume, which I think is great to know if you want to quickly crank up or crank down the volume. And the other pro tip is that you can toggle speak to chat directly from the headphones themselves by pressing and holding on the touchpad with 2 fingers. And just like with the XM4s, the XM5s have wear sensors. So if you take these headphones off, they're going to automatically pause your music, and when you put them back on, they're going to start playing your music again. Now, the fact that the wear sensors on the XM5s are now hidden instead of the exposed wear sensors on the XM4s isn't a big deal. I don't know why some people are making such a big deal about it, because there are plenty of other headphones out there that have wear sensors and they've always been hidden. But regardless, personally, I don't care for wear sensors on my headphones, so thankfully you can turn this feature off. But now let's talk about the active noise cancellation on these headphones. To keep things simple, yes, the Sony WH-1000XM5s are back to being the headphones that block out the most amount of noise right now. Even a little more noise than the AirPod Max, which have been top dog for the last year and a half. But right now, we're going to run an ANC test featuring the 1000X lineup. So like you may have just seen, the 1000XM5s block out the most amount of noise here. And just so that there isn't any confusion, yes, the 1000XM3s continue to block out more noise than the 1000XM4s. Now with the 1000XM5s, you can see that they do a great job of blocking out constant lower frequency sounds like road noise, and they do a spectacular job of blocking out higher frequency sounds like chatter. Something that the 1000XM4s struggle to do compared to the 1000XM3s. And with the 1000XM5s, they now automatically optimize their ANC relative to your wearing style and environment. Whereas with both the 1000XM4s and XM3s, this is something that you would have to manually do. And this isn't just marketing fluff. You can really tell the difference if you were to go through the calibration process at cruising altitude while in an airplane. So it's nice that the XM5s now automatically and continually do this. However, even though the XM5s are blocking out more noise, they do have a little more cabin pressure to them. Now, it's not as much as the AirPod Max, which do give me headaches, but the XM5s have noticeably more cabin pressure than all of its predecessors, and they have a little more than the Bose QC45. Now, cabin pressure might not be an issue for some people, but it is for me. So if you're sensitive to cabin pressure, then you'll want to be careful with the XM5s, or if you want to be safe, you can just go with the XM4s, or if you want really good active noise cancellation, but with less cabin pressure, then you could go with the Bose QC45. But then there's the ambient mode on these headphones. Now, in general, Sony has always had a really good sounding ambient mode. It's not as natural sounding as the AirPod Max, but it's a close second. And just like with Sony's other headphones, you can adjust the ambient mode on the XM5s to your liking. However, I am going to have to say that both the XM4s and XM3s have better performing ambient modes than the XM5s. And that's because of two very specific and fringe cases. First off, with the XM5's new design, that also means new microphone placements. I noticed that while walking outdoors, the XM5s were much faster to pick up wind noise than both the XM4s and XM3s. The microphones are more exposed on the XM5s than with its predecessors. And then there's the active ambient mode on these headphones. With both the XM3s and XM4s, if you're walking outdoors and there's a sudden loud noise, they're going to automatically turn off your ambient mode and simply save you from going deaf, like this. So like you may have just seen, once the XM4s detected that loud noise, they turned off their ambient mode, and when the loud noise stopped, they turned their ambient mode back on. Pretty cool. Then there's the XM5s, which turn off their ambient mode, but then turns it back on, and then turns it back off, like this. So like you just saw, with the same sample, the XM5s reacted, but they didn't wait until the sound stopped, they just did what they did. So yeah, both the XM4s and XM3s are able to react to these situations correctly, but the XM5s just don't. And personally, I just hate to see this type of sloppy regression on new products. So due to the less effectiveness of the active ambient mode on the XM5s, which was a feature that I would really love to show off on both the XM4s and XM3s, and due to the added wind noise on the XM5s, I'm gonna have to say that both the XM4s and XM3s have better performing ambient modes than the XM5s. There's no reason why the XM5s can't get this right. But next up, there's Speak to Chat, which made its debut on the XM4s, and it can be found on Sony's more premium products, and it works a little like this. Hello there. So this is Speak to Chat. Basically, when I start talking, these headphones will automatically lower the volume of your music and pump in all of the ambient sound around you, so that you can quickly talk to someone without having to touch the headphones themselves. Now, these headphones will stay in this state for a preset determined amount of time, which you can adjust through the app, or you can cancel Speak to Chat by double tapping on the touchpad like this. But personally, I'm not a really big fan of Speak to Chat because it's very easy to accidentally activate it. If you're talking to yourself very quietly, that's going to activate it. If you're singing along to your music, that's definitely going to activate it. If you start laughing, that's going to activate it. And on rare occasions, if there's a loud enough outside noise, then that's going to activate it as well. So that's why I don't use this feature. Personally, I still prefer to use quick attention on these headphones because it's a lot more intentional and you have a much better control over it. And basically, when you cover the touchpad on these headphones, they're going to lower the volume of your music and pump in all of the ambient sound around you, like this. And when you let go, the headphones will go back to normal again. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I do prefer quick attention over Speak to Chat because it's a lot more intentional. But Sony still refuses to simply just lock quick attention after it's been activated for a few seconds so that you can just simply let go of the touchpad and have your hands free, like you can with a lot of other headphones that have a similar feature. Instead, you still gotta keep the touchpad covered the whole time that you're using quick attention. And this does get awkward and uncomfortable after a while. So I just want Sony to fix it. I mean, come on, it's a simple fix. But finally, let's talk about the microphone on these headphones. Now, this has never been Sony's strong suit. And to be straight up, the microphone on the XM3s is pretty bad. Whereas with the XM4s, this microphone sounds much better while in a quieter room, but this microphone is definitely still lacking when compared to other headphones out there. And finally, there's the microphone on the XM5s, which does a slightly better job of amplifying my voice than the XM4s. But if you listen closely, there is a little bit of hissing in the background. But the real difference is the way that this microphone deals with ambient noise. Now, right now, my voice doesn't sound super clear, but the really important thing here is that you can understand me, and this microphone is doing a really good job of blocking out all of this road noise. Because with the XM4s, this is just a disaster. You can still hear a decent amount of road noise in the background, but the big issue is that there's a lot of static when I'm talking. And then there are the XM3s, which aren't really blocking out all that much road noise, and my voice still sounds very shallow. And just as a reference, if we were to switch over to my lapel microphone, this is the road noise that we're trying to block out. And here we are back on the XM3s. And the same thing can be said when it comes to blocking out chatter. These headphones aren't blocking all that much chatter, and my voice still sounds pretty shallow. But again, just for reference, if we were to switch over to my lapel microphone, this is the chatter that we're trying to block out. And here we are back on the XM3s. Now, the XM4s are doing a much better job this time around when it comes to dealing with chatter. There isn't any static in the background when I'm talking, and the chatter is reduced. I would say that this is at least usable. And finally, here are the XM5s, which are handling this chatter very well. Now, this microphone has better clarity than the XM4s, and it's also blocking out a lot more chatter this time around. Now, after 5 generations, I will say that Sony finally has a usable microphone on their headphones, but this definitely still is not the best sounding microphone out there. But with all that being said, there are some notable improvements that I like on the Sony WH-1000XM5s. Like I just mentioned, they finally have a usable microphone for phone calls. I like the feel of their new leatherette, and I am impressed by the amount of noise that they managed to block out. But the 1000XM5's new design just brings with it so many drawbacks, and there are so many quirks on the 1000XM5s which were ironed out in previous generations. First off, I absolutely hate the new larger case on these headphones. It really is a hassle when you're traveling with these headphones, especially when compared to the 1000XM4s and the rest of the competition. But also, the 1000XM5s are just less comfortable than both the XM4s and XM3s. Their new thin and minimally padded headband creates a hot spot on the top of your head, and their shallow ear pads press down on your ears. And then there's the ambient mode on these headphones. It picks up more wind noise, and it doesn't actively protect you as well as the XM4s and XM3s do. And finally, there's the sound on these headphones. I appreciate that they have better instrument separation, but they have less kick in their bass than their predecessors. And the instrument separation on these headphones isn't too big of a difference. So overall, if you're trying to choose between the 1000XM5s and 1000XM4s, or if you're thinking about upgrading from the 1000XM4s, then I say just get or stick with the 1000XM4s. The 1000XM4s are way more comfortable and they're way more convenient. And if you're someone that's still using the 1000XM3s, then I say just stick with them. And they still block out more noise than the 1000XM4s. And if you're someone that's still somehow using the 1000XM2s, then I think the USB-C port on the 1000XM4s is a big enough reason to upgrade. But ultimately, I wish Sony would have just continued to refine their 1000XM4s instead of putting out this new body found on the 1000XM5s, which is just an overall downgrade. I would have liked to have just seen the good things about the 1000XM5s get integrated into the 1000XM4s. If you made it this far, I guess you enjoyed the video, so hit the like button and get subscribed. If you want to pick any of the products up, they'll be linked down below. And if you want to further support the channel, check out the merch. I made some shirts and hoodies that look and feel great. And you know I can be very particular, so I'll only slap my name on something if I'm really proud of it.